The First World War introduced tanks, aircraft and machine guns, but its most terrifying invention was designed to suffocate human beings. Scientists, governments and generals turned chemistry into a weapon, believing it might break the stalemate in the trenches. Instead, it opened a new chapter in human cruelty. Within a year of the war's outbreak, the quiet wind blowing across Flanders carried a creeping green gas that blinded and burned soldiers where they stood. The Great War became a laboratory of poison. When war erupted in August 1914, many imagined a swift campaign of movement and decisive battles, but the conflict escalated into something far darker and more protracted. Heavy artillery, machine guns, miles of barbed wire, and the vast industrial capacity of Europe became devoted to killing on a previously unimaginable scale. Yet none of these new tools would match the psychological and physical devastation brought by poison gas. The weapons to come were not designed simply to wound or kill. They were designed to terrify. The earliest experiments with chemical weapons in the war were almost hesitant. France made the first move late in 1914, firing grenades filled with tear gas at German troops. The attack was hardly noticed, but it crossed a moral boundary. Soon, every major power was exploring more dangerous possibilities. Germany, with its world-leading chemical industry, moved quickly from theory to practice. At the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin, Fritz Haber and his team of chemists began developing choking agents capable of destroying enemy lines with a single breath. Haber argued that poison gas could break the deadlock on the Western Front and shorten the war. A chillingly calculated vision of scientific killing dressed up as military necessity. In April 1915, at the Second Battle of Ypres, that vision became reality. As dusk settled, German troops released cylinders full of chlorine gas, allowing a vast green-yellow cloud to roll slowly across no man's land and into the Allied trenches. French colonial troops and Canadians were the first to inhale the toxic fog. Men clutched at their throats, coughing violently as their lungs filled with fluid. Some fled in blind panic. Others collapsed where they stood, drowning on dry land. A gap opened in the Allied line, a gift Germany had not anticipated and did not exploit quickly enough. But the tactical outcome mattered far less than what had just been unleashed. War had crossed a threshold. The air itself had become a weapon. Instead of condemning this new atrocity, the Allies responded in kind. British scientists rushed to develop their own chlorine gas, while France expanded its research into more lethal agents. By late 1915, gas attacks were no longer a shocking novelty but a grim expectation. Soldiers lived with the constant fear that a change in wind or a distant hiss of gas cylinders might signal the last breath they would ever take. Morality bowed before military logic, and the development of chemical weapons accelerated. Chlorine was only the beginning. Later in 1915, Germany introduced phosgene, a far more deadly choking agent that smelled faintly of cut hay, deceptively mild, almost pleasant. Unlike chlorine, phosgene often killed slowly. Soldiers who felt fine at first would collapse hours later as their lungs filled with liquid. Britain and France soon replicated the formula, and artillery shells replaced gas clouds as the preferred delivery method. No longer dependent on favourable winds, commanders could saturate enemy positions at will. The Western Front became not just a battlefield, but a controlled environment for the testing and refinement of airborne death. By 1916, chemical warfare had become systematic. Gas shells fell with artillery fire, mixing with high explosives and shrapnel. Soldiers wore gas masks as routinely as helmets, slept with them within arm's reach, and trained to don them in seconds. These masks saved lives, but they also redefined the experience of combat. Breathing through a filter of chemicals, vision fogged behind glass, sweat pooling beneath rubber. Men fought not only the enemy, but the suffocating closeness of their own protection. Fear itself became a constant companion. Even when gas didn't kill, it unsettled, weakened morale, and corroded the mind. The descent continued. In July 1917, Germany introduced mustard gas, the most feared weapon of the war. Unlike earlier choking agents, mustard gas did not need to be inhaled to cause injury. It clung to skin and clothing, soaking silently into the body. Hours later, victims developed painful blisters. Eyes swelled shut, lungs burned with every breath. Even a slight exposure could result in weeks of agony, and many survived only to live with permanent disability. Worse still, mustard gas lingered. It soaked into earth and equipment, turning trenches and shell craters into poison spaces where men could be harmed long after the shells stopped falling. This was not a weapon designed for quick victory. It was designed to maim, to overwhelm hospitals, to break armies by breaking bodies slowly. The Allies quickly responded with mustard gas of their own. By 1918, no front was free from chemical warfare. Russia suffered devastating casualties at Lake Narok and other battles, where inadequate equipment left soldiers at the mercy of drifting clouds. German troops too experienced the choking terror of Allied gas barrages. Chemical warfare recognized no uniform, no nationality. Once released, the poison belonged only to itself. By the war's end, more than 1.3 million soldiers had been gassed. Around 90,000 died outright, but the true toll lived in the lungs and eyes of survivors. Countless men returned home, scarred for life, coughing, gasping in cold weather, half blind, in constant pain. Many could no longer work. Some could no longer speak without wheezing. The war had ended, but the gas stayed in their bodies, a reminder of what science becomes when stripped of conscience. When the guns finally fell silent in November 1918, the world looked back in horror at what it had permitted. The Geneva Protocol of 1925 banned the use of poison gas in war, an admission that something fundamental had been violated. Yet the knowledge could not be undone. The factories that produced gas could be restarted. The techniques could be relearned. The wind could always be weaponized again. The development of chemical weapons in the First World War was not an accident of history, but a choice. It was intelligence without humanity, progress without restraint, and proof that civilization can collapse not with chaos, but with calculation. Chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas were hailed as breakthroughs by those who made them. Yet the only breakthrough they delivered was new levels of suffering. The Great War should have taught the world that some weapons cannot be justified by strategy or victory. Instead, it taught us how easily human ingenuity can be turned into poison. If you're enjoying the videos and want to see more First World War history brought to life, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the channel. Every click helps new people discover these stories, and it genuinely supports the work that goes into researching and presenting them.